Adam, we about ready? I know. All right, we ready to roll? Good. Ready? Cool. All right, we will call the meeting to order at 6:30. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the April Plan Commission meeting for the town of Fortville. Please rise and for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, everybody's microphones on. Alex, you can hear us? Excellent. All right, can we run through the roll call, please? Thank you.
Mr. Siebert. 9.
Here.
Here?
Here.
Here. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Again, welcome to the April Plan Commission meeting for the town of Fortville. Next on the agenda, we will, I'm looking for a motion to approve the meeting agenda as stated. And I guess before that, Adam, do we have any modifications, any changes needed at this time? Okay, excellent.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Next, we have, I would ask for a motion to approve the meeting minutes of March 26, 2024 for the March Plan Commission meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review? Any revisions, changes needed at this time?
I'll make a motion to approve the March 2024 meeting minutes.
Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, moving right along. I appreciate, thank you very much. Moving to the continued business from the March meeting. We have case number RZ01 2024, the Mersha Lauth PUD rezone. To review and conduct a continued public hearing, I believe, and issue a recommendation to the town council regarding ordinance 2024 3B, a petition from the Lauth Group to rezone approximately 38 acres from industrial I-1 to PUD on the north side of Garden Street and south of Industrial Drive. And for those who may not have been in attendance last time, this was considered at the last meeting and was continued to this meeting. So we expect some updated materials. With that, Adam, I will hand it over to you for the presentation if there are any updates, I suppose, at this time.
All right, good evening. For the record, I'm Adam Zakwitkowski, the Planning and Building Director for the town. So I'll just skip ahead and go over some of the updates to the project since the March meeting. So first, one item that the developer has proposed changing is the west side parking lot layout. They've moved the parallel parking to the perimeter of the project instead of down the center of the project. In terms of the PUD standards, since the March meeting, there are a few provisions that they've tweaked. And you should each have a copy of that in front of you. First, there are supposedly revised renderings for the multifamily buildings. Those have not yet been seen by staff. They have not been included within the PUD document. Second item is the multifamily portion, or area A as it's called. They wrote may consist of fewer but larger buildings with a maximum of 225 units. And that's up from 204 maximum units that were in the previous version. Third item is they wrote multifamily buildings are subject to, quote, four-sided architectural review, end quote. And then lastly, they wrote EFIS 5% minimum, although I'm thinking they may have meant maximum. In terms of the staff analysis on the revisions, we've had very little time to analyze those revisions, which were submitted by the developer yesterday. Though what I can say from a professional perspective is, first on the revised parking layout, the previous design purposely oriented the small town or urban neighborhood feel towards the center of the multifamily area as if it were a town street with parallel parking. And moving the parallel parking as a frontage road along South Madison does very little to create a neighborhood. As you know, light industrial buildings would still be across the street. So in my opinion, the remainder of the multifamily portion of the project now has no identifiable neighborhood center, and the layouts frankly seems more like a generic suburban complex. In terms of the revised PUD standards, if the buildings may be combined, why not combine them now in the plan? Frankly, the vision of the project is not very clear. And then lastly, as I mentioned, I'm assuming that the EFS should probably be a 5% maximum, not a 5% minimum as written. So my recommendation here tonight is to continue the item to the next meeting, but if the applicant wishes to move on tonight, they certainly have the ability to do that. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Adam. Questions for Adam at this time? Just to clarify, Adam, the couple of points, like the 225, those were all things that were requested revisions basically at game time last month, correct? That we were considered, that hasn't changed from the last meeting.
Not necessarily. Again, I've had no
Okay.
discussion with the developer
Okay.
on these changes. They just basically submitted them yesterday and said, here you go. So for again, the renderings, we haven't seen those. In terms of the unit count, I don't know why the units were increased. And then the third bullet point, yes, we did talk about four-sided architectural review, we talked about four-sided architecture, which I think is what we're getting at. And then the last bullet point of EFS, the 5% maximum, I do remember talking about that last time. So at least on a couple of the points.
And
we
the
did
four-sided
talk about.
architecture was in response to the change in masonry percentage, correct? That we were going to spread that around, and that was, so
Right,
that's the term that
so-
we're going to incorporate instead of the masonry on the first level.
So originally I had mentioned in the March meeting in my report that in order to enhance the architecture on the buildings of which they were using a prototype from a project they did in Franklin, Indiana, I had my advice was to seek first floor brick wrap. They had mentioned that that might be cost prohibitive. To do that, let's do 20%. So the 20%, I think, was in both documents, but they wanted to stick to that 20%. But they were willing to limit the amount of EFS
Okay.
instead of outright prohibiting it, as I had suggested.
Suggested in the previous standard. Okay. Any other questions for Adam at this time? Okay, we've moved to the portion of the meeting where I would invite the applicant to come forward, say and state your name and how you represent the case.
Let me start out by addressing some. 85% maximum, that's fine. I'm not sure if that's there or this result. the law. The park, I don't want to say it's law, this, we can care very project. However, at your discretion, parking will be located as you see fit. It can be along the proposed map. It can be. It's entirely up to you. As to the changing units, it was felt that larger buildings with fewer buildings would be popular. And then finally, there's been much discussion about really the external appearance of these buildings. I'm going to address number one. Adam has suggested a continuance of the project. Frankly, we certainly don't want to see the project continue for various reasons. Number one, sticky tape. This project in large measure hinges on the immediate development of anchor tenant for commercial that's in power. You heard from Empower during the public meeting, talked about the fact. Empower is frankly under some time crunch. They want to be moving dirt by July 1, and consequently the process needs to move forward. Without Empower, this project becomes far less feasible, if not impossible. The issue of revisions and appearance of the buildings themselves is one that's always one that's in the development tension in these. I don't mean that in a negative sense, but to move from simply conceptualization and representation to architectural diagrams, engineering, etc., is an extraordinary thought. Based upon a lot of experience with prior projects, we believe that to go to the next step, which they're certainly willing to do, is a cost of in excess of $500,000. And obviously, no developer wants to incur that cost on an upfront basis, unless and until.
Oh, it's on that. There you go. Go ahead. Continue.
Okay, well, whether on line and I apologize. Anyway, as I was saying, the progression of these projects is get the land use first, and then move forward to the extensive cost as to the finalization of architectural drawings, engineering, and so on. We feel that this project meets the needs and interests of Fortville, particularly because it paves the way for the extension of Madison. And in the booklet you have, there are other representations of projects done by law that frankly you could look and choose. And depending upon the direction received, then that's the direction that would be followed by law. By example, I know in some casual conversation, we wanted a project that presented sort of a townhome or townhome feel. The first photograph that you see in the booklet that has been provided, I think presents that for townhome nature. You can see that masonry is used, but also a variety of other building material that gives real aesthetic treatment that, you know, you're not just looking at a standard box apartment building, you're looking at something projecting and so on. The second, I think, truly illustrates a townhome feel. We've got interesting architecture, and I think this Ryan Duffy's and large board. This is the one I'm talking about. Again, there's been discussion about a flat roof. This obviously presents a flat roof. And then finally, another rendition of an existing project using various thank you, Adam. Using various elevation projections, masonry and other materials, balconies, et cetera. So Lauth prides itself on quality developments and cooperation with elected and appointed officials. And what we have tried to do, and I think we've done so, is bring to you a project that is sufficiently specific to allow you to give it not only close review, but also a favorable recommendation. And at the same time, have input going forward so that when Lauth continues the path of development and makes the necessary expenditures to really move the project forward, that they have direction from you as to your tastes. And we have tried to provide options that we think are in keeping with what we've heard here. So I'm not sure I understand why, I honestly just, I don't understand revised renderings for the multifamily buildings have not been seen by staff. There were some slight revisions made, but again, this part of the proceeding, thank you, Joe, is a land use issue. Is this real estate appropriately developed on a planned unit development basis that provides not only industrial uses, which is the current zoning for the entire site, but also a transitional housing option that flows into the industrial use, but also provides, and again, I know this was discussed at length, the transportation plans of the town of Fortville, particularly with regard to the extension of Madison. So again, I note in your ordinance, and I believe it's sections 5.2, 3, and 4, after a preliminary approval, there's a detailed plan review process. Now, that can occur, it's kind of a long timeline. It wouldn't be the case here, but after preliminary approval, after approval by your legislative body, then this has to come back for final plan approval. That has to occur within 12 months of the preliminary approval. And again, tonight's decision is by no means the end of discussion, but at least it sets the foundation to move forward, to present the project in a fashion that is acceptable to Fortville, economically feasible, and so on. When we say four-sided architectural review, literally what we're talking about, again, if you look at the depictions you have in front of you or on the board here, it's a question of there are many options. What do you like? What is most palatable to Fortville? There was another item that was requested that we did provide, and that was demographic data. Lauth has done an extensive study of the demographics of this market to see what price points are supportable or sustainable. That's been provided to Mr. Zakalakowski, and I'm sure others within town government have reviewed it. The demographics suggest that there's a market for this product, that there's a need for this product, and that this can be developed in such a way that it's a price point that is feasible not only for the developer, but for prospective tenants. We hope you found that data helpful. It certainly supports and guides Lauth in their consideration of the project and how they put it forth. So I'm happy to answer questions. Mr. Thomas can answer questions, but I would just wrap up by saying that from my perspective, and I haven't been involved in every aspect of this, we've tried to be responsive to the requests of the community. We've listened to what has been stated, both by you in public hearings, by Mr. Zakalakowski in extensive meetings between Lauth and him and his staff. on certain points, we are entirely flexible. Parking, put it where you want it. Just tell us where you want it. And as to exterior finishes and appearance, again, topic of discussion, by no means concludes tonight. The EFS 5% maximum is fine. And we think, again, four-sided architectural review in connection with at least 20% masonry, and that was discussed at great length at the last hearing, that allows the use of masonry in different fashions around all sides of the building. So we ask your approval this evening so that this can move forward, pave the way to bring Empower to Fortville, which I think will be a great community citizen employer that is locally interested in this area. If you have questions, we'll do our best to answer.
All right, thank you. Questions for the applicant? Yep, absolutely. Any
So
other
just
comment?
looking at the renderings that you do have here, like these are just the concepts. You wouldn't be going to like the full height, like on the one in Carmel, because I would be curious if that would be a height issue. The Fishers, Indiana one, like that, personally, I kind of like the question I would have about the third one in Noblesville. Would your gabled roofs go a little too high? And I'm curious, you've got all the AC units down here on the side. The person in that unit, would there be a noise pollution issue for them?
I think Mr. Thomas is probably a little better at answering that question. These units are rented and they're successful. You know, I know my heat pump sits right outside my kitchen window. I can hear it, but it's fairly quiet. In
Yeah,
fact,
6 of them?
I don't have 6 of them, but I mean, again, that is spaced along the side of that. There are days I wish I did have more than one. You know, just as passing remark, I'm not the decision maker, but Fisher's is kind of my favorite among those set forth here. I think that's really an interesting look.
Any other questions?
Not for the applicant, I do for Adam.
Okay. I do, while we're here. So one of the concerns last time was kind of I don't want to call it half-baked, but that there were some unknowns, right? And that we would be moving forward with a PUD with some unknowns, and that allowed maybe too much flexibility moving forward. And so I guess I would like to know on the multi-family portion, what considerations would change that would change the nature of the buildings to condense to a smaller nature? I would just like to understand if we're gonna consider that flexibility in there, what's the reason for it? Now that we have the demographics, now that we have a lot more of this information, I guess I'd just like to know what the remaining unknowns are that would leave us to keep that flexibility in the PUD.
Well, yeah, and again, Ryan said, I'm not sure I understand the question. I second that.
So what requires the lack of unknowns that we're going to change and potentially have fewer large buildings with the multifamily? Now that we have demographics, we have, you know, it's been 30 days. We've gathered more information. We're still at the same level of unknown. Why is that?
Fewer buildings allow greater occupancy, provide more open space.
Why are we still in that space of consideration? We haven't made a determination on what the overall footprint is, and why is that? And what would potentially change that from now to breaking ground in the summer?
Okay, I understand your question now. I'm Ryan Thomas. I'm Lauth's Senior Vice President of Development Services. A couple of things I just want to back up on just to be crystal clear.
Yeah.
On the comments here, if you recall, the last time we came in front of the commission, we made some changes to my chagrin, the morning of, or if not the night before. And we presented them, and there was a little bit of confusion about why we did it. So the comment that Adam made that they haven't had time to review that, I mean, that information hasn't changed from March 26th. So roughly 34 days we've been sitting on that information. So we have had ample time to review that. With regard to the parking, Originally, we had the parking as depicted on the site plan, and then Adam asked us to change it and put the parallel parking in the middle, and then we came to the commission and you asked us to change it back. So we have flipped it back to the outside. And to Mr. House's point, we're indifferent. It's 6 in one, half a dozen in the other for us. We want to provide something that the town likes. With regard to your question, as far as why we're at the point of the unknowns. So the way this started was, I think in the original PUD, we noted we would have 7 buildings. We got a little uneasy about locking into 7. We don't know if the hydrology is going to work. We don't know if we really want 7 buildings. We might want 6, we might want 9. We don't know. So we locked it at a 225 unit count. What that equates into, whether that's 5 larger buildings or 8 smaller ones, we frankly don't know, because we haven't done the engineering, we haven't done the architecture. So that also, to Mr. House's point, that lends itself, it's around a $500,000 plus or minus expenditure. I know we've thrown around that number, but it's reasonable. Most of that is architecture. About 20% of it is engineering. So here again, we view this as a land use exercise, not as a design and geometric layout exercise. Is this the question we're trying to answer for you and present something that, is this an appropriate land use for the property, for the parcel? How the buildings lay out, I think there's ample time, if I'm not mistaken, later in the town's process to review building layout, to review geometry, to review trash enclosure locations, those types of things. I even think the item on the agenda after us tonight is in fact that very thing for an ice cream shop, architectural review. So I don't want, and I know you know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. You lose no discretion on how that geometry lays out or what that architecture looks like by not deciding it today. In fairness to us, we're trying to give ourselves as much flexibility as possible. We recognize the fact that we have to come back in front of this body and back in front of the town council in order to gain those approvals. We're just trying to make it as flexible as possible.
Okay, understood. I just wanted to understand what that unknown was so that we know, eyes wide open. And so if it's site engineering and hydraulics, I understand that is
Yeah,
dynamic
and
at this point with a site that large.
We don't so much as have topo on the ground yet, so
Right.
we're not 100% sure where really the buildings need to be located. And
Sure.
I know which way the water flows in general terms. That's about it.
Sure.
So that lends itself to the uncertainty, to answer your question.
Understood. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Hang around. I'm guessing we'll have a follow-up session here shortly. Thank you. All right, next we will move to the public comment section of the agenda. This is an opportunity for members of the public, either in attendance tonight or online, to speak for or against this proposal. So I would invite anybody to come to the microphone. Please say and spell your name and your address at this time. Thank you. All right, anybody online while we're waiting? Oh, we've got one coming up. All right, wonderful. Thank you.
Dana, 1643 West 1000 North. Our biggest concern is if this development proceeds, we're on 1000 and it's already a very high traffic, you know the word I'm trying to use, road. So what's the plans? Like, are they going to be responsible for how traffic and stuff, or is it going to be like the town's responsibility? Has the town thought about it? Like, because it's already hard enough to get out on Fortville Pike off of 1000 North, especially once the road construction and stuff opens back up. 1000 North is only a 2-lane road. Having more traffic from not only apartments and stuff, but with 13 coming on across, like it's going to be, so are we looking at that at the same time of thinking about approving this as well? That's all I have.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
I've got a comment.
The public. All right, how about online on Zoom? Do we have anybody who would like to speak for or against the case?
I've got a comment.
Could you, can we see say and spell your name and your address, please?
My name's Josh Schmockers, 1070 East 1000 North. So I'm outside of town. My biggest concern with the project is the undefined industrial parcel, the larger parcel. I understand the electrical contractor taking the northern industrial parcel. I don't have any concerns really there with volume, but I think what's being depicted as far as the industrial parcel, I think it would behoove the council to maybe provide some restrictions on what that use might be. Right now, it's being depicted as if it were, large warehouse where it could be a lot of, semi traffic. I have a feeling that if that's what was ultimately developed in that parcel, there'd be a lot of semi traffic coming down 1000, heading toward 9 to get to 70. 1000's already a kind of pretty narrow road. I think it would make for a dangerous situation for residents outside of town to have to deal with that level of traffic. So if it's a different type of industrial use, so be it. But I think some restriction on, a warehouse with high volume of semi traffic, I think would be wise to, I guess, encumber on the project.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any others looking to speak for or against the case, either on Zoom or in attendance tonight? All right, we have time in the agenda for public officials. Anyone like to speak for or against the case tonight, in attendance or on Zoom? I'm seeing head shaking, no. All right. Before we have you come back up, I think we got to, well, I don't know if I should handle this with, I think Adam can speak to some of the traffic concern. I know there's been a concurrent traffic study done by the town. I don't know if we want to handle that before having the applicant come back up.
Well, and to clarify with the concern from the citizen, isn't there plans to continue South Madison Boulevard beyond this?
And that's what I'd like to get into, maybe a little bit of the, exactly, the
I just wanted to
mitigation.
hopefully incorporate that response into the answer, and then I'd be good.
If we could talk through traffic considerations for, was it South Madison? Yeah, the South Madison corridor down to Fortville Pike. I think that might enlighten some of the concerns. Adam, would you be willing to just
Sure.
kind of give us an overview of what is expected, mitigation, et cetera?
Well, couple things. So first, having this bypass, as we'll call it, around the downtown area has really been, it's been a town proposal that's been on the books in one way or the other for really, I think, about 20 years. The concept has been refined a number of times. And the latest version of it, there was some basic engineering analysis that was done by Banning Engineering a few years ago that would basically continue this South Madison Boulevard from 1000 North, as you see here, and it would go to the intersection of 200 West and Fortville Pike. And there would be a traffic signal there. So at least for the north-south traffic, that is the long-term vision of the town. Now, how quickly that happens, I think a lot of it is dependent on the market and dependent on the redevelopment commission if they want to take more concrete steps of purchasing right-of-way, as they've done with this project up along Broadway. The second thing is, as for east-west traffic on 1000, I don't recall offhand what Garden Street is slated to be in that area of town, if it's supposed to be an arterial or not. But to my knowledge, there hasn't been any in-depth analysis of what traffic would do east-west down that road. So Another option that you could have is, I think back to one case with Mount Vernon North was a PUD. There was some traffic concerns. And in that case, the developer hired A&F engineering, just a basic transportation firm to take a look at general movements and the amount of traffic that'd be generated and just showing what basic level improvements you'd have to make at different intersections. So I think if the concern was there, that would probably be understandable for this particular project.
And one quick point of clarification, because I recall it coming up last time, then again tonight. The vision for South Madison is in fact intended to pull heavy truck traffic away from Broadway. And so that will be built in such a manner that it is intended to handle and is actually expected to handle truck traffic, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so just want to clarify that for those in the audience, those online. That is somewhat the nature of the South Madison arterial vision for the future. So, and I guess the other point of clarification that I have here, the I-1 industrial zoning would limit to some extent. There are brackets around what can be utilized in that zoning, correct? As it's being proposed in this PUD, because it's I-1.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Sorry.
No, I was.
The other aspect that was shared as a concern is that the use case for the industrial parcel being undefined as an I-1 parcel, there are some brackets around use cases for the parcel. It may not be entirely tailored and hemmed in, but there are only specific use cases allowed.
Right. So for the uses, they would be bound by light industrial zoning for uses.
Okay.
Now, just a caveat, as is the case with any sort of any zoning district, somebody can propose a use variance that would allow a completely different use or a higher intensity, and that would be analyzed by the Board of Zoning Appeals. But
correct,
those are generally, we'll say, infrequent cases. More frequently than not, people follow the zoning as prescribed.
I got a quick question. Back on the South Madison Boulevard. Right now, North Madison is also State Road 13. Will this continue State Road 13, or does this become South Madison Boulevard, and then whose jurisdiction is that? Is that a town street, or is that now part of US 13 or State Road 13?
No, it would, NDOT does not want to take on any more state roads. So 13 would still end at US 36. So this would be a local street.
Okay, and that would be under the care of the town of Fortville?
That's correct.
I'd like to invite you guys back up in case there are any additional questions from the Plan Commission for the applicants.
I have a couple of comments. I'm not necessarily questions.
Sure, absolutely.
And I guess it's, I might call on Alex to clarify a couple of things here. It was mentioned previously that they would be coming back to this body for additional discussion and such at a later date. My understanding, and Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, that if we proceed tonight and give approval, it will not come back to this body unless there's a significant change. And then we would need to define what that significant change would be if we indeed wanted to see it again before proceeding. And those things that would be left up to, that were previously mentioned, like trash enclosures, I think you mentioned, the finer architectural details. I think I mentioned in the prior meeting, turn lanes, the lighting, all the plantings, et cetera. That would be left up to staff and to the actual town council to discuss. Those things would not come back to this body. So we would need to determine what would qualify as a substantial change. And I would think that the number of buildings would indeed, but that's just me saying. So I would ask Alex to weigh in on how that part would work and to restate anything I may have misspoken.
Yeah, Robert, I think you're right with respect to the PUD ordinance.
when the plan commission signs off on that, and then it goes to the council it's an ordinance for their approval. But the ordinance itself would not come back to the plan commission unless there were unless they needed to amend it. The next phase, and a lot of the conversation is about the more specifics. That's a site plan review. And there's the piece of the future development that could very well come back before the plan commission.
So I guess that's where the question would be is, would the plan commission require that site plan be submitted to it? Because I don't know, Adam, in the past, has that come back to the plan commission or it's been primarily left to the council?
Yeah, it has. It's come back. So they would have to, for the multifamily buildings under our ordinance, a detailed site plan would still have to come back to you all for approval on that before we can review the final plans and then ultimately issue building permits.
Okay.
But just to be clear, one way or the other is that at that point, the scope of what you're asked to review is limited because it'll be based on what's in the approved PUD. So if they came up with, the exact same plan that council ultimately approves, let's say they approve it like this, at least on the site plan portion of it, if they're doing it according to what's in the PUD, then there's not much wiggle room there.
Well, I would say unless there's just, again, back to a significant change.
And then if there's a significant change, yeah, then,
and my understanding is that could go to fewer buildings, or you said you didn't know how many buildings. Is that qualify as significant before it would need to come back?
no, under the current language, I don't think it does because
Okay.
just the language that's in there right now, it just says they could be consolidated. And so, no, it wouldn't have to go back to you, which is again, part of my concern is that the PUD, the biggest function of it, in my view, is you're really painting the vision for what it is that you want to do. And while I understand that you have to be flexible in terms of different things change, some kind of core parts of the vision, in my view, aren't completely solidified yet. And I don't know if you want to give that much latitude.
So I have a question to piggyback on that because that was kind of one of my questions. So in the past, and is this because this is a PUD and it's a little different than other projects that have come before us? We typically have the opportunity to approve the site plan, which would include the parking, the elevations, and the lighting. Do we not have that opportunity because it's supposedly locked in on the PUD documents on this one?
Well, yes and no. So for example, the way that it stands right now is that I would offer that on the site plan portion of it, they've already shown quite a bit of detail on the site plan. So
Right.
there probably wouldn't be as much wiggle room with that as one might think. But on the architecture, if the commission and the council were okay with, say, using those 3 different renderings as, showing the quality and the vision for that, then sure, you would have I think you would have a lot of ability to make changes or comment one way or the other.
So the elevations will come back to this
They
committee.
both would. Yeah, as would the site plan too.
Okay.
Then my question would be then is if we had any heartburn about the changes in the layout, the changes in buildings, I mean, we would be able to vote our conscience and just cast a vote of no on the elevations for that. Yes?
When the elevations come before you?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't believe as a board that it's consistent with, say, these 3 photos, which would be integrated in the PUD ordinance, then sure, I believe you'd have that ability.
Because I do understand there is a cost, obviously, when it goes to the architect to start planning. I totally understand that, but I feel like we should at least give them some sort of a direction for them to start their elevations or whatever from, instead of.
So from a process perspective, the concern seems to be the flexibility with the multifamily. And I appreciate the need to get moving on the potential tenant. Is there any reason we could not be less flexible in the PUD and say, let's approve it with some of these considerations and the buildings as shown? And if you go through the site engineering and come back and say it's a substantial change, we just review that portion of it. So we approve the PUD. Is that something that could be done? I guess that would require both parties to be trusting. But if it seems like that there is right now the burden of substantial change is being placed on the town, why could we not flip that paradigm just to protect the town's interests? Such that if there's a change, as long as I don't want to jeopardize the project,
Can we find substantial change?
how do we get this moving and keep all people? Because
If I may, so I think from a development standpoint, if we had our way, we'd go build it pretty much like you see it right here.
Right.
This is what we'd like to do. We laid it out kind of in a best case scenario. The way we've laid it out makes sense. Is it going to work? I don't know. My point is if there is a quote unquote substantial change and we come back to this body and or the council and we have to deviate from this, there's going to be an awfully good reason why we have to do it. Probably going to center around hydrology. It's going to center around utility locations, something to do with elevations. Like I said, if we wouldn't show something in here that we have no intention of building, we hope that we can do this, but we're not positive quite yet. So if there was something that we brought before you that would qualify as one of those substantial changes, I'm going to bring a good reason. And here again, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. House or Alex, if you didn't like it, to your point, you can simply send a negative recommendation to the council and say, not so much. And then the council has the final say on that is my understanding. And that, I think that's your oversight. I just wanted to respond to Dana's comment quickly with regard to the traffic. Is there going to be more traffic? Yes. I can't stand in front of you and say that there won't be, because you can look at that right there and know that it's an agricultural field right now, and it's clearly going to have more traffic. The converse to that is to understand that there's going to be more infrastructure to support that same traffic. So we're perfectly willing, to Adam's point, to bring A&F to the table. They're the most renowned traffic study group in the state. More than likely, they do almost all of our work. Bring them to the table to do a traffic study. And also, one of you pointed out, I don't recall which one it was, that this is not a vision, so to speak, that Lauth came up with, that we want to see South Madison Boulevard extended through. This is really us following the feasibility study and the TIF analysis and whatnot that the town had put in place. Whether or not we would or would not prefer to have a road right down the middle of our development, I'm not really sure. I never really entertained the notion of not having it, because that was the town's vision and kind of was a requirement, frankly. This needs to be there. And it became a fixture in our development that this was going to be a traffic reliever for Broadway, for State Road 67, and ultimately connect all the way down. And I think it goes down to 200, if I recall. So we're happy to do the traffic study to support that and submit to staff for their review to substantiate what that traffic increase may or may not look like from a wear and tear on your road situation.
So I guess back to my question.
Yep.
And I don't doubt you. I believe that you want to build this as is, and you've got a good reason you come back for a substantial change. What then is the risk to, if we lock in with the existing language instead of the flexible language saying we're going to use these buildings, is there real risk coming back before the town to approving the town's vision with, hey, look, I've got an engineering problem that I've got to solve by adding one additional building or consolidating one additional building? Is there a risk to the development in seeking that substantial change to the ordinance that allows you to continue with your anchor site and then also gives the town a little bit of risk mitigation by reducing flexibility in the PUD? Because I agree with you that it'll be a reasonable body's going to come up and agree with you. It's an engineering problem we're solving. Let's move forward and we'll approve that change.
And again, we'll ask Alex to chime in if he agrees or disagrees. I think what you set out is correct and appropriate. The hydrology question is a perfect example. I do a lot of this work. And in the past, had a situation, it's build-ready site, it's build-ready site. That's what the public officials said. Well, fortunately, the developer said, yeah, we're just still going to do some analysis. Well, it was a build-ready site because it was flat, but someone years ago had decided to fill in a low spot with tree trunks and God knows what, and it was a marsh. That's the kind of thing that would be discovered through the due diligence and engineering phase. And then you have to figure out, how do we address that? Maybe we move a building, in that case, bring in a ton of rock and so on. As I say, but real quick on transportation and traffic. I was a city councilor for 10 years. That was a long time ago, and the problems we grappled with in Greenfield are now being resolved. It takes time. Just from a good government standpoint, I view this as darn near magnificent, okay? And one of the important points of this project is this can be the jump start to make this more of a reality. And I think that the benefits that will occur traffic-wise to the community are significant. And frankly, it's probably not going to happen for a long, long time unless you have a project like this with a developer that says, okay, we see it, we understand it's a given, that's where we start, we'll work it into our plan. So Lauth is not out to pull the wool over anyone's eyes, but we do seek, and we've received it in time, guidance, direction, and your comments so that we can pursue the project in keeping with your desires. But quite honestly, it's not a pejorative comment. Sometimes that's a little hard to figure out. I'll
Okay,
add in, I agree with what Brian's saying, and also with respect to a substantial deviation or from the plan. It's normal for the town, and that's part of Adam's job, is to flag those issues, if not flagged by Lauth, when plans come in. So that's normal course. And just like Brian said, a lot of times you just don't know. We don't know. Lauth doesn't know what it doesn't know right now, and neither does the town. So there could be changes, and we'll deal with them if and when they come.
I think at this point, we're going to keep going round and round unless we just say, look, we're going to vote our conscience on this. Either we like it or we don't. And if we have a problem with the later elevations, we vote no at the elevation meeting. Like, I think at some point, because I have to admit, like, from a common sense standpoint, yeah, we don't know what we don't know. Indiana is a nice flat piece of land, and we don't necessarily know what's in it until you break ground. So, I mean, we're asking for assurances that they can't give us, and they're asking us for some trust on some go ahead that we have to decide if we're going to extend or not. But I can say I don't want to sit there and keep beating the dead horse on this. We either have to make a decision or not.
Well, and what I would suggest is you deliberate a couple things. Is first, on the architecture issue, I think the comments that you all had, and members of council and the public, on the architecture that was originally proposed, I think this is a vast improvement. So if nothing else is gained, it's that there was better architecture that resulted as a result of your deliberations and discussions. And I would, having looked at these now and being familiar with these projects, I'd be comfortable with utilizing these, just putting these in the PUD instead of the ones from Franklin. However, on the site layout side, if they're okay with the original layout that we had before, we'll call it the previous layout, and they didn't seem that it was a big deal, then what I would suggest is to go with that previous layout, go with this architecture, and then move it along.
I-
But that's just me.
Yeah, I agree. My opinion is, I do like the site layout from the previous one, only because it gave it a more of an urban feel rather than having the parking right on the lot. This is my opinion. If I had to choose, B and C are my preference. I'm not crazy about A. And of course, this is all, design subjective, right? I mean, what I like may not be what, Jason likes, may not be what. So, but I agree, we have to have a starting point or we're never going to move this forward or kill it, either one.
All right, any other questions? We'll deliberate once we get a motion. I appreciate it.
So just real quick, when we're talking about rolling back to the previous layout, are we talking from the previous meeting or this one? Because this is the one that we had discussed when they rearranged the parking, this was what matched the original TIF layouts. So are we talking about what are we talking about with the previous layout?
Well, what I'm suggesting is the layout that was presented at the March meeting. This particular layout, it does not meet the TIF vision. For that vision, you would have the buildings would go right up to the edge of the right of way. You would have no parking whatsoever, say along South Madison. But even if what I was saying and trying to make the point as clear as I could, maybe it still wasn't, is even if you move these three buildings, say up along South Madison, they go right up to the edge of the right of way. It doesn't really solve the problem of what do we do about kind of the interior part of the project. And so that's why the thought process was that if you create this neighborhood feel that goes right down the middle, that because it would be flanked by buildings on both sides, as opposed to industry on the other side of the street, it would feel a little bit more like a village from that design perspective. So it's achieving the goal of, especially what we wanted to have on the Broadway area, of having something more walkable, small town oriented or urban. You could throw all those together. So just my take.
Hey,
So-
Adam,
Oh.
what is the actual standard masonry requirement that was in the PUD? So I see that the request is for 20%.
I thought it was 1/3
Was it a third
First floor.
for the first.
In
floor.
the,
or in the first
what was the standard and what they're asking for 20%.
total? Right. But the standard was a third on the first floor. Is that right?
I think that's what originally we had talked about was, or first floor wrap, if I remember.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. If we've got no other questions for Adam or the applicant, I would look for a motion for a favorable recommendation, a negative recommendation, no recommendation on the rezone 01/2024 Commercial Lauth PUD.
I motion for a favorable recommendation on case number RZ-01-2024 with no conditions.
All right, do I have a second?
Don't we need to have a condition that EFS should be a 5% maximum?
Yes.
Well, we can make a new recommendation. Is there not a second for a or no conditions?
Well, if that was a typo, that should just be corrected and amended. We don't have to make that a condition.
Okay.
Question is, the EFS will submit, we'll change it, submit an amended ordinance. We can stipulate it's 5% maximum.
Quickly,
And we'll have revised renderings.
with the renderings, that would be a condition that we would need to fold those into the PUD as well, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So anything that we want to add from this document that's not included, which would include anything else we would need to add as a condition, just a clarifier. So,
I think we need to specify which layout, because they are different.
correct. Same with the layout as well. So, do I have a second on a no condition motion? All right. Motion's dead. Do I have another motion? Favorable, no recommendation, negative recommendation for the rezone.
Make a motion for favorable recommendation to include the new renderings as presented in the current meeting. We utilize the site plan layout from the March meeting and also to change the wording to a 5% EFS maximum.
All right, do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion before voting? Any conversation, deliberation?
So this is talking about taking this layout and going back to the previous one from March.
Correct, which had the parallel parking down the middle, which created more of a city street layout with the buildings facing in instead of out. They all faced in towards, is that a public street?
I think it's a park street.
Whatever that, but it created really more of an urban feel.
Well.
Yeah,
More of a village, yeah.
Yeah. so that is the layout that's been proposed. Okay, any other comments, deliberation? All right, we'll move to voting. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Abstain? Those who aren't present. All right, motion carries with a 4-1 vote. Congratulations. Thank you very much for your time tonight and in March, and we will see you again soon. All right, moving on to new business tonight. Appreciate the patience in the audience. We will move to case number architectural review 01-2024 222 West Broadway Street. This will be an architectural review, public hearing and approval of the architectured site plan for substantial modifications to 222 West Broadway Street for a planned ice cream shop. Petition from Kevin Crotchfelt, property owner. All right, Adam, if you've got presentation and hopefully samples on hand, that would be wonderful.
Anything,
No.
Adam?
I'm hungry. Oh. Probably at both. We just need to make it known. I don't know that it. You can ask questions, you just can't. There's a lot of it. That may be BCA for so long.
All right. So for this case before you tonight, this involves 222 West Broadway Street. And the petitioner on the project, Kevin Crotchfelt, he's the property owner. The zoning on the property is commercial community CC, and it's within the Broadway Main overlay. And the use of this particular property, it's vacant at the moment. The property previously contained a used car dealership. And there are 6 rental units on the property behind the main building along Broadway. So the request before you tonight is Mr. Crotchfelt intends on leasing his vacant space at 222 West Broadway Street to a tenant for an ice cream shop. The RDC approved facade repair funding for some of the remodeling. The BZA approved a variance for continued use of the non-conforming pole sign on the property at their meeting on April 25th. And then Plan Commission review and approval of the architectural and site plan portion of the remodel is required per the zoning ordinance. So if we take a look at the structure, some photos that were taken last week, you can see the building in question. And then this is obviously the same thing, just from a different angle. We can always refer back to these. And so just a refresher, the zoning ordinance in the section is noted under Plan Commission duties and powers states the following, that decisions approve with conditions or deny substantial exterior improvements in the Broadway Main Overlay District for commercial projects. And then another section of the zoning ordinance states for building expansion or change of use on a site with non-conforming site features, every reasonable attempt shall be made to upgrade the site and building accordingly to the provisions of this ordinance. So if we take a look at the site plan that was filed, you can see those multifamily buildings in the back, and you can see the parking around the front and on the sides. There would be a one-way flow of parking, and of course, the parking part of it would be on a diagonal. If we take a look at the renderings, which were supplied to the Redevelopment Commission for facade repair funding, you can see what the building would look like. Got a few different vantage points. This is what the light fixtures would look like. They point downward. And then there are some light fixtures that again point downward, can lighting that would be within the canopy ceiling. So in terms of the staff analysis of this project, first on the concept site plan, the parking lot would be repaved. They meet the minimum drive aisle width required for one-way traffic at 14 feet. In terms of the parking, at 6 dwelling units, 1.5 spaces per unit, they'd have to have 9 spaces, so that's fine. For the ice cream shop, it's 0.5 to 1.5 spaces per 300 square feet. So that would equate to 3 to 8 spaces. And so they've got 21 spaces provided, including a required ADA van accessible space. For the landscaping, screening along Broadway would be required, has not been provided. The applicant wanted to discuss this item at the Plan Commission meeting. The required screen dumpster enclosure would be provided. Then in terms of the architectural portion of it, the facade would be enhanced with some new brick veneer, some new hardy plank siding, and new paint. All the windows would be replaced. The garage doors would be replaced with new glass windows. Decorative metal corbels would be added. They would have a drive-through window on the south side of the building, and then a decorative gas pump would be added in between the 2 garage doors. In terms of remonstrance, all the public hearing notice requirements have been met, involved a sign posting, newspaper publication, and a mailing. No known remonstrance to this case. So with that, my professional recommendation would be to approve it subject to the following conditions. Number 1, the ADA space shall be widened from 10 feet to 11 feet to meet ADA requirements. Number 2, the ground-mounted HVAC unit on the west side of the building shall be screened from Broadway. And then number 3, the 3 junk vehicles on the property shall be removed or properly registered within 30 days. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them. And the applicant is here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Any
The applicant was here. I think he just had an emergency and left. So should we proceed?
I'm okay with proceeding.
I would, I'd recommend
Okay,
proceeding.
all right.
If you all are comfortable with that. I think it's a pretty straightforward
Okay.
case.
Any questions for Adam? I have one quick clarifier on the parking. You noted 6 dwelling units. What is that identifying? Is that?
So in the back.
Oh,
in
on the back of the okay.
property, yeah. On the same property, there's technically these 6 units spread out.
Okay. But we're really just talking about the
4 buildings.
architectural review up the front.
That's correct.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Is there anybody else here with us or online that was representing the applicant? I don't think so. He was.
Because he's my customer, I can't even represent him? What's the legality of that?
Good question, Amanda. If you have, it sounds like you may have a financial interest in it since you've got
Yes.
some tied to it, then you should just recuse yourself. You can,
Okay.
you can feel free to comment, but you just can't vote and should recuse yourself from that.
Okay, because I think I knew what his wishes were on that landscape strip, but if he's not here to speak,
Oh,
I probably,
Yeah, I'd say not to speculate. And
okay,
if you all, well, with you recusing, I mean, if the remaining members are comfortable with the presentation and Adam's recommendation, certainly, and if you don't have any questions for the applicant, certainly no harm in proceeding. But if you do have questions that would be appropriately answered by the applicant, then I would say continue.
all right, thanks.
If she recuses, do we still have quorum for vote?
we four.
Yeah,
As long, yeah. We would just need a unanimous vote to pass.
correct.
Okay, then I will ask a question here. If we were to approve this subject to the recommendations, would the town council then be able to go through and strip those recommendations out like they've done previously?
No, it ends here. The plan commission, it doesn't go to council for architectural review. So,
It's not merely a recommendation, then it's.
This is approved.
right. And then the next step would be for us to issue the building permit on the interior remodel and authorize the exterior work as well. I think there were, in discussions with Mr. Crotchfelt, there were two items that he was concerned about. Number one was for the architectural component of it. The redevelopment commission approved funding, for the garage doors, the glass garage doors. And of course, he went ahead and ordered that and said, well, is there going to be a problem now with the plan commission? What if they vote something different? And, I'll concede that's, there's two different ways of doing it. You can either go to the redevelopment commission first at the onset of the project and say, hey, do you have any funding for facade repair? Or you could go to plan commission first. So I understood his concerns. So at least just take that information for what it is. And then the second thing is for the landscaping, I think his concern along Broadway was he didn't frankly want to have to go in and cut out the pavement to put in a landscape island. Again, not to say that it can't be done, but to his point, it is infrequent to do that. So at least from a staff perspective, I would be okay, approving it as shown and with these three minor conditions, but I'll leave that up to you all.
I do have a question, Adam. The sign that was shown
Mhm.
up there, is that like an old fashioned sign? Is that the sign that he's planning on using? Or is he going to have to replace that with a more modern sign? Or is he going to have a variance for that sign that's going to cost additional money?
Yeah, so yes, it's a historic sign. Yes, it's non-conforming, and yes, he got a variance for
Okay.
it. And so it doesn't meet the current code in terms of the height, in terms of it being a pole sign, of it being a polycarbonate face. But the BZA ruled on that aspect of it, so.
I like those signs. I think we should have more of those types of signs in Fortville.
And that was what I can say, I haven't been at that meeting, and Liz was there too. That was a lot of the topic of conversation. That is kind of a neat retro sign, so.
Just
If he, no,
comment.
are you finished? I don't
Yeah,
want to
no,
interrupt
you're
you.
fine.
Okay. If he doesn't put in the landscaping in the front, is that going to break with what the town's plan is for rolling trees down Broadway? Is that going to create a gap?
Well, in terms of putting trees on Broadway, we have always been restricted by the amount of public right of way that we have there. So I don't know exactly how much is in the right of way, how much is on private property, but regardless, is the area between the back of the sidewalk and these parking lots along Broadway, it's really tight. So as much as I think we'd all like to have street trees down there, it might be challenging to do that. I think the only other comment would be that if you see where this temporary asphalt patch is over here, I have a feeling that maybe that's generally where the right of way is, and then it goes on a private property. You know, that they ripped that up when the state did that when they did their project. So just to give you a sense, it's a pretty narrow area of public property there.
Any other questions for Adam? Okay, we can move to the public comment section of the meeting. Anybody who would like to speak for or against this case may do so at this time. You can come to the front, spell your name and your address. Wonderful, thank you.
Hi there, Vanessa Battaglia, 219 West Garden Street. I had a question about it. It's not really a for or against, but I had a question about the parking spots that are laid out in the diagram there. The notes up at the beginning of the presentation said 9 parking spots for the 6 units, which meets that 1.5 parking spot per unit number. I only counted 8 there, and one of the spots is like this wee itty bitty little mini spot that looks like it's for a motorcycle. The one up on the right, it's like itty bitty. So as you kind of, if you cruise along counterclockwise along the diagram, the first parking spot's next to that dumpster, and then a second and third. And then you have these sort of interesting parking spots that are between the houses. I actually live right behind this. Right behind those houses is my backyard.
Oh.
So I know that area very well. So then you have these parking spots that are between the houses, down at toward the bottom, like around 5 o'clock in the diagram. And so that makes 5. And then as you scoop up to the right, 6, 7, 8, that's all I see. And, I'm just kind of an interested, concerned neighbor because I hang out there all the time. These guys are my neighbors. I hang out on their patio, basically. And so I know that whole area pretty well. And so, I just wondered, gee, why is there 8 instead of 9? And that one spot, that's the last one up,
Yeah,
up over there.
let's see if I counted correctly. What there's,
Yep.
are you following the arrow?
Yep.
There's 1, 2, 3, 4.
No, that's a spot. What the heck is that?
Here?
What is that? That's nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's just a dimension line showing that it's 10 by 18. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Well,
What you're seeing is a dimension line. There's,
Showing
it's,
how far yeah.
okay, I didn't count either of those as spots, but I would just offer that particularly then, if that's a spot right there, that 4th one that Adam counted, that's, just from a traffic safety perspective, I don't know if all of this has been, done according to standards or approved by somebody, but these parking spots are going to be, they have a big blind spot because they're behind a dumpster. So you'd have to come in, and then you park them when you go to leave. You can't really see out because there's the dumpster right there and then the pink elephant next to that. And then you've got cars coming in. And then particularly over on the other side, well, before I get to the other side, that 4th spot, I mean, that's very, very tight to that property. That is basically a patio right now, that 4th spot. So, just if you were to go look at that area, I would kind of just question, is there physically room for this? Because I think feasibly, I think it would be very difficult. And then also, if you're in one of those spots and you somehow back out and don't back into traffic that's coming in, and if you make your way around basically the same drive-through traffic pattern, you might also note that it's kind of tight up on the right, where you've got diagonal parking spots right up against the building, and then you've got other parking spots over on the other side, and you've got parking spots over there. I just saw it and I just thought, how do we know there aren't going to be like 3 different cars trying to back out all at the same time and they're pinching a car trying to drive through? You see parking like that at McDonald's, but that's like a big, huge parking lot. This is not a very large place. So I just wanted to make a couple of notes about all of that. Some of the parking spots look kind of tight. The traffic flow, I was sort of curious about. you know, and all these same people are there now. They're all kind of making do now, except now you're adding in some visual impediments, the dumpster that's there that wasn't before and stuff. So if it's been reviewed and it's up to the code and everything, okay, but it seems a little tight to me.
Thank you.
So can I ask the
Thanks.
question? Are those spaces for the residences at the bottom of this diagram?
The ones that Adam counted are for the residents. So around the outside of the clock formation, basically.
So that brings the question, are those going to be marked? Are they going to be in, what happens if the ice cream shop gets busy and customers for the ice cream shop park in the residence parking spaces and they have nowhere to go?
I don't think they can. I don't think they can park the
Well,
residence spots.
The only thing I would offer is that Mr. Crotchfelt is the owner of the building and the owner of the rental unit. So, you know, it's up to him as an owner as to how he wants to sign things and if he wants to have dedicated tenant parking, that I don't know. But it would be up to him, I'd say.
Yeah, I believe it was supposed to be dedicated, like marked parking, but also just one final note before I hop off here. Those spots between those two tenant buildings, those are also kind of like, you know, basically an alleyway for people to walk. So I would just add that to the feasibility questions. Nobody's parking there right now. Those aren't parking spots, but I guess we'll see. Thank you.
There needs to be delineated. Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else like to speak for or against this case tonight?
No, but I am just going to clarify. So if customers park in the residence parking spaces, the customers have, or the residents have nowhere to park to get into their apartments.
I think that's up to the property owner.
I'm the future tenant, Libby Waddle. Kevin, the owner, had said about the parking, that he was going to make it like a permit parking designated just for the tenants. Nobody can control people parking in people's parking spaces. It happens. The 10-minute parking space on Main Street, people park there for 2 hours. So, we're hoping that the drive-through is going to help people not park and drive through and get out. But, and then the comment about the dumpster, currently the tenants have trash cans that they push out and put on the sidewalk. They're using the same dumpster we are. So that's going to help clean up some space too.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. The gentleman in the back, yeah. Oh, do we have someone online? Can you say and spell your name and address, please? Just identify yourself. I scare him away. You're more than welcome to share. Oh, maybe not. All right. Any others who would like to speak for or against the case at this time from the public? All right. We've got time on our agenda for public officials to speak for the case, for or against the case. All right. Come on down.
Tanya Davis, Town Council. The question about the landscaping and the trees along Broadway. Just like Adam said, the right of way is so close. There's not a lot of room there. And I think the least you put out there, the easier it's going to be able to see the traffic. I don't like the idea of blocking what little bit of view you're going to have anyway, because there's one entrance in and out to that parking lot for everything now, since the NDOT project put that one entrance there. So staying away from landscaping of any kind, I think is smart, just to no distraction, or you're going to have possible accidents and that part. But I don't think it adds that much to it to say you can justify putting it there. So just my opinion. I think it's a great layout.
Thank you. All right. right. Adam, one quick question for you. Can you pull up the layout one more time? I'm just curious where the drive-through is located. We're talking all about traffic flow. Is it
So I believe the drive-through will be somewhere back in this
on the
area.
backside? Okay.
You might be able to see it from the back
Is there a
view,
rendering?
that one.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a smaller window that's down there. Yeah.
This one here, yeah.
Okay. So there's room within the site. I don't know if anybody here has been to the Dairy Dream up in Albany, but it routinely backs out onto the main facility there. So, which Libby's is even more popular. So I'm sure we're going to get that kind of traffic. But no, that provides some stacking. The way they have it set up is it's basically drive through right off of the driveway. So this works. Okay. Any other questions for since the applicant's not here, for Adam at this time? All right, then I would look for a motion to approve with conditions, or deny the request for architectural and site layout.
I'll make a recommendation to approve the site plan to proceed with the stipulation that the tenant parking spaces are clearly designated.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Quick set of conversation. I know that there were a couple of additional conditions set out by the town.
Yeah, the
The
ADA.
ADA piece is something that I think we should certainly pursue to meet ADA requirements. The junk vehicles, again, same, which I anticipate they're cleaning up regardless.
I'll amend.
Okay,
Yep.
Sure.
I'll amend that. I'm making a motion to approve the site plan with the stipulation that the tenant parking spaces are clearly designated, that the ADA space shall be widened from 10 feet to 11 feet to meet ADA requirements, that the ground mounted HVAC unit on the west side of the building shall be screened from Broadway, and the 3 junk vehicles currently on the property shall be removed and properly registered within 30 days.
all right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any other discussion? All right, let's move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Yes.
Yes.
All right, motion carries 4-0-1. Congratulations. We hope all is well. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We do have time in the agenda for board comments. Is there anything that the board would like to discuss or comment on at this time?
Only thing I
No,
was
but
gonna-
Alex, don't go away.
Only thing I was going to mention was on the, and kind of curious, we can talk after the meeting if you wanted, but for Tanya and such, as far as I guess I never really thought of the landscaping as more trees related, because I would agree with Tanya that may be more of a, run interference in your sites. But I was thinking it more of shrubs, something that more of a designator, as a barrier between like the cars when they park there and the parking stops and the sidewalk. That's all, that's where I was going with that landscaping. It could be. That was my interpretation of that.
Barrier
Since he
between.
wasn't here, just some sort of, I would agree. I don't know that it's necessary, but I didn't look at it as trees necessarily.
Okay. Oh, good point.
Nothing else from me.
I'm
Jason?
looking
Oh,
for.
go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead, Jason.
No, my comment is for Alex afterwards. I just don't want him to leave. Mine's not related to this.
To the meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not meeting. I just didn't want him to sign off and go away.
I'm looking forward to more ice cream.
I think we can, all in favor? With that, any other comments? All right, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, second.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.